So welcome again to Founder to CEO Leadership Evolution, part of the Entrepreneur Scale Up series. And today's agenda is we're going to do a quick introduction to the Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Center, the Scale Up series, and then we're going to introduce our speakers that you see on the panel here today already. And we're then going to jump into our panel discussion. I will facilitate that discussion and ask a couple of questions, and then we're going to jump straight into the questions that you have, and the panel will answer your questions that you submit. So please feel free to use the chat to type in the questions that you have, and at the Q&A session, I will read out your questions in the order that they came in. And thank you for all of you who have joined. And you might notice that you only see yourself, and that's the fact of using the WebEx platform. We do currently have 14 of us here online, and we're expecting a couple more to file in from the registration numbers that we have. So welcome to everybody who's here. And the Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Center. So the Mississauga Entrepreneur Center is your one-stop shop for business advisory and business support if you're looking to start and grow your business. We are part of the Mississauga Economic Development Office, so feel free to reach out to us and connect with us. And in terms of the things that we do, we have business advisory services. We have the Digital Main Street program, the Starter Company Plus program, the Summer Company program that is available during the summer, and additional training and workshops. So we're here to support whatever your needs might be to start and grow your business, your venture, and your innovation. And more about the training, webinars, and workshops, you can find more information about the events, such as today's event on our website. The URL here is listed, so please do take a minute to check out what we have on the website and join any of the sessions that you think would be helpful to you, including some from this Scale Up series that we have, which will be labeled Scale Up and in purple. And we're here to help, so feel free to reach out to any of us. And here are a couple of people who you might find relevant to what it is that you're working on. So an introduction to myself, I am John Lamb, Entrepreneurship and Innovation Specialist. Feel free to reach out to me about your entrepreneurship and innovation endeavors, whatever it is that you're starting, whatever it is that you're growing. I'm here to support some of the scaling innovative companies who might be looking to scale here in Mississauga. Susan Lovelace is our small business consultant, and Laura Dunkley is our digital marketing consultant. So if you have any questions relating to those particular topics, feel free to reach out to them. And to reiterate, Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Center is the small business, is here to support small business and support and success. So here is more contact information for you to reach out and let us know how we can help. Feel free to follow us on social media also to keep up to date with everything that's going on. And now for our Scale Up series. So this is one session that is part of the 8 sessions in this Scale Up series, really meant for innovative companies who are looking to grow their ventures and looking to grow their innovations. So if you want to participate in all of these sessions, then you can check out our link in one of the previous slides for the webinars. And here are the topics that we will be speaking about. Last week, we talked about founder issues and legalities. This week, we're talking about founder to CEO leadership evolution. What I want to draw your attention to is the sessions in the new year where you get to meet a mentor, you get a check-in and pitch prep, and you get a pitching opportunity. These ones are going to be invite only for those who have followed through with all 8 of the sessions. So if you are interested, if you are working on something that's related to Industry 4.0, you are scaling, you have some revenue between maybe 100K to 2 million, or if you're patent pending or have patents already, or if you've raised pre-seed or seed money, and if any of those three criteria you qualify for, please let me know. And if you're interested in meeting with a mentor, getting that pitch prep, and then pitching in the new year. And happy to have you on board. So please feel free to reach out to me about that. Now, on to our panelists for today. We have lots of experience, lots of stories to share, and lots of uh, insights to provide to you from our panelists today. So just very quickly, starting with Dr. Monica Yazdanian, who is in the middle here. Dr. Monica Yazdanian is the CEO and co-founder of ToeFX, a medical device startup that designs, manufactures, and sells solutions for fungal nail infections. Prior to ToeFX, Monica was the inaugural director of the Forge Business Incubator at McMaster University. She grew the Forge to from its inception to about 130 plus alumni companies and about 26 million plus dollars raised. So really impressive resume and working on some really cool stuff. Everybody, big round of applause for Monica. And then we have Daniel Yabo on our left here in the image. Daniel is Alurka's founder and general manager. He's a serial entrepreneur and health professional with diverse expert experience across all sides of the um, chronic care system. Daniel's 10 years experience as a healthcare provider in oncology and rare disease nursing provided the core vision for Alurka's human-centric approach to delivering exceptional, proactive digital therapeutics solutions that provide continuous, integrated whole person care. So big round of applause. Thank you for being here today, Daniel. And on our very right here, Vigen Nazarian. Vigen is actually an entrepreneur in residence here for the Mississauga Business Entrepreneur Center. In addition to that, he has done a lot of cool things, including he is the president for New Binary Ventures, a full-service venture and product development company providing advisory services to early-stage startups, SMEs, and educational institutions. A serial entrepreneur and co-founder in 3 companies with successful exits. Vigen is also, of course, our entrepreneur in residence and has a lot to offer, has seen a lot, has worked with a lot of entrepreneurs to be able to bring to you the insights that we will provide today about the leadership evolution of going from a startup founder to a scale-up CEO and a CEO of an established company. So big round of applause. Welcome all of our panelists. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to turn off my slides now here and turn it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. Feel free to say a couple of words about yourself, about your organization, and why you think this topic of founder to CEO leadership evolution is important to talk about for companies who are looking to grow. I'll hand it off to Monica to start. Over to you, Monica.
Thank you, John. And hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here. I think this is a really important topic, so I'm really pleased to have been asked to participate. John, you told me 6 minutes. I do have about maybe that much material, but if it's going over, please just give me a signal. So hi, everyone. My name is Shokat Monica Yazdanian. I'm born in the UK, lived in Canada for many years. I spent 5.5 years in the US. I hold a law degree from Western University, and I did my PhD in chemical physics at Cornell University, an Ivy League institution in New York. For me, one of the things I find very motivating is the old DuPont motto, better living through chemistry. So what interests me and what motivates me is improving human life with science and technology. I also have a strong interest in journalism, and throughout my PhD, I was a recurring feature writer for the Toronto Star. So after graduating, I co-founded an e-commerce software company. And to support my startup habit, I taught physics at the University of Guelph and worked with a law firm on litigation support. The company had a good run, but we made absolutely every possible rookie startup error. It's very embarrassing in retrospect. I am happy to share my experiences with all of you. And I accepted an offer to be Director of Research and Development for the top quantum dot research lab in the country, led by Professor Ted Sargent at the University of Toronto, where I helped raise over $6 million in private and public funding for technology and commercialization projects. I then accepted the role of founding director of the Forge Business Incubator at McMaster University. And as John said, it was a wonderful project. We grew the Forge from its inception to over 130 alumni and quite a bit of money raised, 26 million. Not bad for startups, very early stage startups. I love this role because I love working with startups. I love working with early stage technology and helping and mentoring startup founders. So I keep in touch with many of the founders I worked with. I did, however, depart to start again at Startup Life, to join TOEFX, a Canadian medical device company that has created a safe solution for the treatment of onychomycosis, which is an infection of the nails. The solution is based on photodisinfection. It's non-invasive and drug-free. We've completed clinical trials. We have our product is in market, approved by Health Canada. We like this problem because it's a big one. It's very scalable. Some 10 to 20% of the global population has this infection. It's prevalent all over the world. So although we're starting in Ontario, our vision is definitely to scale up globally. We find this is an important problem also because it's one of these silent conditions that people don't talk about. When we talk to our customers, when we talk to our patients, some of these anecdotes really stand out. We had the patient who said, my husband hasn't seen my feet in 5 years because I've been hiding this infection. Or the man who said, I've segregated my house, my wife and I don't use the same bathrooms anymore, I'm so afraid of infecting her. So we think this is a silent problem. It's affecting people's health, their mental health, and we really want to make a difference. So very happy to be working on this project now. TOEFX is located in Hamilton, Ontario. We have 5 full-time employees and 5 contractors and part-timers. Our product, as I said, is approved by Health Canada, and we're currently looking forward to branching out into the United States. Why do I think this is an important topic? I really do. I'm happy that you guys reached out to me to discuss this topic. I think it's important for a number of reasons. My own opinion is that Ontario has gotten pretty good at creating places where new startups can feel welcome, and where early stage startups can congregate to find people and resources. Starting a business is relatively easy. If you have $200, you can register your business, and calling yourself a founder is free, right? But growing a business, making sales, making revenue, scaling up is really, really hard. I still think there's work to do at the scale-up level in the province. I'm speaking from both sides as someone who's been involved in program development and as a startup founder. I think the more you scale, the harder it is to find peers who have meaningful experiences to share. Not because they don't exist, but because they are very busy solving some of these hard problems. So yes, I think it's an important problem to address, that it's not necessarily the most attention-grabbing headline in the world to say, I grew my revenue by 50% last year. But it's really difficult, and that's how we're going to grow as a province, as a country, by creating bigger businesses that employ more people. So that's my opinion, and that's it for me.
Thank you, Monica. That's so important. Like growing the revenues is such an important part. And like you said, it might not be headline grabbing, right? A lot of the headlines we see is raised however many millions of dollars, but it's that revenue that is really the blood and the lifeline of an actual company, right? So thank you for being here. I'll turn it over to Daniel for an introduction about yourself, your organization, and why you think this topic is important.
Thanks, John. I think number one, thank you for the opportunity. It's certainly a pleasure to be here. Just a little bit of background about myself is, like you mentioned in the introduction, I've been a nurse for over 10 years. And I think one of the exciting things for me over the last 10 years in healthcare is I've seen the evolution of health, and I've also had an opportunity to look at healthcare delivery, how it's delivered from the patient side, from the payer side, from the provider side. have an opportunity to work in the ER, to the OR, to the ICU, to units. My background has brought me into insurance industry where I've done cost containment. Again, still acting as a nurse, but really looking at, again, healthcare and looking at healthcare through the lens of different payers. And I think for me, what was really interesting is, again, looking at what the objective is for each stakeholder, and how that totally different, how that is vastly different from what the patient is looking for. And a lot of times the objective of the stakeholder and of the objective of the patient never aligned. And so the last part of my career, I spent in specialty health, where we manage drugs that cost in excess of $10,000 a year. And again, so I've had a really good opportunity to look at chronic disease, oncology medication, rare disease medication, again, and look at how do you truly create something that is designed around that individual to create true positive outcomes. And so because of that, for me, what I felt really the passion to do is create a company really focused on number one, managing chronic disease, but number two, behavior change. And it's really born out of a personal story where there's diabetes in the family. And so because of the diabetes in the family, looking at opportunities where there could have been behavior changes that would have driven better health outcomes, that's where 360 Care was developed. And so 360 Care is our platform, which is a lifestyle and behavioral health solution for people that are living with chronic conditions such as diabetes, hypertension, obesity. And so we provide comprehensive health coaching, health tracking, remote monitoring, all through the convenience of our mobile app. And so we use this hybrid approach that brings empathetic live care. So we have live certified diabetes educators who are also our health coaches. We use that data flows, and then we really focus on really having that unique user experience. And it's all powered by our back end, which we call Symphony. And so what we try to do as much as possible is offer members that personalized behavior change coaching with our licensed healthcare professionals. And so we have a team, like I mentioned before, of navigators, dietitians, psychologists, social workers, and chronic disease specialists that all look at that individual's care from a 360 point of view. And that's why I really called it 360 Care, and based on a continuous care model. And so, when you look at that, I think one of the things that I really believe is why I think this topic is really important is we talk about founder to CEO is looking at the evolution, right? Looking at the evolution of what does it take to be a founder, and then how do you transition from that concept to now managing a full company with full employees, where you start to see your goals and objectives change very quickly. And so I think it's really important because for me, I talk to a lot of individuals that are entrepreneurs, people who want to be entrepreneurs, who they might be facing similar issues or they might be having questions. Yesterday someone reached out to me and they wanted to start a business. And they wanted to start, when you look on a scale of 1 to 10, they were already at 8. And I had to literally bring them all the way back to 1, saying, who's your customer? Who's going to pay for it, right? Don't build something before knowing who your ideal customer is. And it was a little bit frustrating for them. I get it, right? But it was the reason why I did that is I wanted to avoid them having some of those pitfalls that I experienced. And so it was really important for me to share, what, don't do this, try this. Because if you do this, this is what could possibly happen. And so for me, it's really exciting because I get to share my experiences with other individuals that are in the space, other budding entrepreneurs. And that's why for me, mentoring, providing office hours sometimes, talking with companies at the very early stages is exciting because it's just nice to see these exciting minds saying, you know, I want to do something. And then for me, that's why I think this is why I do it. And that's why I also think this topic is very, very important.
Amazing, thank you. And I love what you said about, you know, that entrepreneur already at 8, you have to bring them back at 1, because there's that notion of timing, right? As you mentioned, the tasks, the jobs of the leader change. So
Right.
you have to time it for yourself as well to make sure that you're doing the right things at the right time. Because it's not that step 8 is wrong, it's just not at this time, right? It's not the most effective thing to do. So that's really amazing. And I think that as perhaps first time startup founders, as they're making that transition, it's hard to map that out and be like, okay, yeah, you know, this is the right thing to do at this particular time. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Over to Vigen.
Thanks, John, and thank you for our co-panelists to be on this session. I really love the diversity of thoughts and experience that they bring to this panel. And also thank you to our participants to be part of this important topic. So a little bit about myself. Long time ago, I started a journey as a researcher, came out of University of Toronto. I did my undergrad and grad there, and I got hired by a biotech pharmaceutical company in Toronto. And after about 10 years of doing research at the industry, I decided to leave and take interest on the business side of the science. So through many years of spending within the intersection of technology, transfer from university and capital and people, I ventured into building and co-founding 4 companies. Of those 4 companies, 3 I was the CEO, and I had successful exits. Thankfully, 2 of those companies became public companies and currently still going. That experience was very interesting for me because, frankly, I didn't go to a business school or learn about MBA in a formal setting, but I learned quite a bit by experiencing the life in the founder role and as in the CEO role. There are 2 dimensions to that. One is the company dimension and one is the personal dimension. That's how you grow in that role. So needless to say, after several of these experiences, there's a ton of learnings, ton of know-how that I thought would be helpful to share and become a mentor with young researchers, young entrepreneurs coming from university environment or the community. So I became mentor in several incubators and accelerators. And in the last, I would say, few years, I've joined to a joint venture with a company called New Binary, and I started building the New Binary venture arm of the company. So what New Binary does, it provides technical and business know-how to help entrepreneurs navigate their way towards scalable, successful companies. So we have senior executives, fractional CTOs that they help companies to build their product. And on the venture side, we help these companies to become more agile, more strategic, and more mindful of some of the opportunities that they can avoid and take advantage of in order to build a successful venture. We have a venture fund, and I take the lens of an investor when I look at companies that are coming to us for funding. And I'm sure most of you know the team part is one of the most important part in any venture. And of course, the leader in the team, usually the founder, the CEO, is one that we pay particular attention. The topic is really important to me. First of all, I lived that life many times, and I know what it takes to get to playing the founder role and CEO role. Some people are naturally good as being a founder or being a CEO, but sometimes not both. That's an important realization, and I think that, you know, as a founder, one needs to make. I think this is more addressed towards the founder. But there are a ton of opportunities to reskill and redevelop those important skills and learnings that you need to undertake in order to transition to a CEO role, to a point that the company is more focused on the operations and putting systems in place, and the role of the CEO, that is to grow, build the culture, manage people, manage relationship, as opposed to being a founder more focused on the product, trying to establish the product in the market, find new customer, and it's a chaos. That's a life that you live. You never have enough time. You never have enough time for yourself. And I've seen many burn in that process. Also, as an investor, I've noted that, and it's important to realize, sometimes you have a really great investable technology in a company, but not the right founder or founders to take the company to a scale level. And sometimes it's purely the transition from founder to CEO. So these are issues that comes to reality when you get to a point that you're starting to raise money, building your team, keeping your team, and creating a culture that reflects confidence, reflects the path, the know-how that you know towards goals that are specific, and the execution of those goals are very important. So those are the reasons that I'm very interested in this topic.
Amazing. Thank you, Vigen. And I love that you have so much experience with this, because you can talk about both sides, right? Founder and CEO, making that transition, and you've seen people kind of go back and forth between the two. So that's fantastic. Thank you for being here. And thank you, Monica and Daniel, for being here once again. We're going to kick it off with our first question. Easy one. In one word, what would you describe as the role of the founder? And in another word, what would you describe is the role of the CEO? Of course, easy is not the accurate description. It's a facetious one. You can use a hyphenated word as well. What would you use if it was just one term to describe the difference between these two roles? Yeah, again, take it away.
Cool. Well, I was thinking about, you know, as a founder, what would one word or words could reflect that? So if it's okay, I'm going to say a few words. I think the first word that came to my mind was rush. That's the feeling that you always have as a founder. Fast, opportunistic, in a good way. And on the CEO side, probably the most common thing that comes to my mind is, and it's a hyphenated maybe way of saying it, is operations, systems, focus, execution.
I love that. I think that really, paints a really good picture. Monica, do you have any thoughts about that?
I do. So again, I thought one word is difficult. I hate to condense it to a single attribute, but you asked me for a single word, so I tried to make it a good one. And the word I thought for founder is indefatigable. So someone who works tirelessly in pursuit of their goal. And you can see the French origins of the word fatigue, but for someone who doesn't tire. They'll plunge their teeth into the project, they'll plunge their teeth into the problem they've decided to solve, and they don't let it go. So they'll embarrass themselves to move it forward. Take hold of that core idea like a bulldog, and you make a thing where there was nothing before. You create this baby. And as has been noted, it doesn't necessarily mean it always translates into a successful business. So I would say it's a necessary but not sufficient condition for success. I really like Miguel's words for CEO. I believe the word I picked was leader, comma manager. I was leader dash manager, but actually I think those were very good words that Miguel mentioned. It's more about getting things organized, keeping things systemized. It's at the point where raw energy isn't enough anymore to sustain a scalable business. That's my take.
Amazing. Can you repeat the word for founder? I'm unfamiliar with that term.
Indefatigable. Sorry.
How do you spell that?
INDEFATIGABLE. Sorry, I was trying to find one word that condensed everything.
I think that's great. I think that's great. That's why we're all here to learn. And I think, you know, that what you described, it's that I think, you know, if we think back to um, some critical examples, right, in the past 30 years in entrepreneurship, um, the example that comes to mind for this word specifically is Steve Jobs, and what, you know, people wrote about him as that reality distortion field, right? So when you use that term, that's what I think of. It's that raw power, just make it happen, and then worry about the consequences later. It's just make things happen, right? So I think that's a very great word. Daniel.
Please.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm sick jotting down notes and really trying to come down to that one word. And I think for me, I'm going to use the word launch. And I think I say the word launch is, I think as a founder, sometimes you get stuck in overthinking. I'm not ready. I want to try this. What if people say this? And you never ever launch, right? And so, one of the things when I talk to a lot of startup founders is I tell them, just launch it, right? Just put up the web page, just start collecting emails, just start, right? Because the moment you start learning. The moment that you hit that launch button, that's when the learning process begins. And so when you sit and overthink, what happens is you just get caught up in this maze of 6 months goes by, a year goes by, because you're afraid to put up your idea. When you transition, when you look at the other word of a CEO, I think the one word that I'll say is scale, right? And so now as a CEO, you have to put on a different hat. How do I make this thing of creating 10 widgets? How do I get it to 100 widgets? And when I hit 100 widgets, how do I get to 500 widgets, right? And it's really, how do you begin to grow the business? And it's interesting because I was listening to a podcast yesterday and they were talking about Facebook. And Facebook had posted their quarterly results. And their performance as an organization, I think they were growing at something like 12.5 or 15%. And the comment was, at that scale, for an organization to grow at that rate is very, very impressive, right? When you're in the billion plus and you're growing at 10 to 15% on an annualized basis, you're still doing pretty well, right? And so again, it's really understanding that, as a CEO, your role changes to scale. And that's what my opinion is. It's how do I make what I'm doing a lot bigger than it is?
So it's the difference of the focus. It sounds like the CEO is looking way further ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. So as a CEO, we are today is October 28th. As a CEO, you're thinking October 28th, 2022, and you're always in that place, right? What am I going to be doing a year from now or what does a year from now look like? And then working your way backwards to figure out, okay, these are all the things that we need to do today over the next 3 months, the next 6 months to ensure that, yes, a year from now, we're at a 25% growth rate, or we're producing 500 widgets, or we've hit our 1,000th customer. What are all the things that we need to do? So it's setting those clear objectives in the future, and then asking yourself, what are all the things that we need to do, and what supports that need to be in place in order to meet those objectives.
Amazing. Yeah. So just as a recap, the words that we got for founder were rush, fast, opportunistic, indefatigable, launch. And for CEO, it was operations, system, focused, leader slash manager, scale, and also this element of looking ahead. So when do you know you need to make that switch from rush, fast, opportunistic, indefatigable launch to operation system focused, leader, manager, scale, looking ahead? When does that, like, what indicators that have you found to really be effective as a founder to be like, okay, I need to make that switch now. I need to be perhaps a bit more steady. I need to look a bit further ahead. I need to put some systems in place. What are the indicators?
I can go. To me, the number one indicator is the need to hire more people. When you're starting to hire more people, you basically at a level that the product is established, it's shown its proof in the market, you're generating revenue, and you're trying to scale, and you need people. You need to bring people and put them on different roles and delegate responsibilities. And to me, the best indicator are when you start thinking about hiring more people.
I have not much to add to that. I agree. I think it's when you can't do everything yourself anymore, you have to start managing people.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. It's when you are at the point where you start hiring individuals to do the things that you're doing, and you've now built a team, your role changes. And and I also, my add-on is, it's very important to be cognizant of the transition, right? Because you're not bringing on individuals to sort of allow you to be free, but you're bringing on individuals to allow you to be more strategic in your thinking. And that's where I think it's really, really important.
So I think that's a great point, and I really like this consensus that the hiring people, bringing on more people on the team seems to be a bit of an inflection point. What I want to ask is, what you said, Daniel, about letting them be more, or hiring people so that you can be more strategic. Is there a difference? Like, yes, hiring people is an inflection point, but is there a difference that is marked by the type of people that you hire? If you hire co-ops and you have to manage them, and it doesn't allow you to be more strategic, is that different from hiring, say, full-time permanent people that really allow you to be strategic? Is there a difference, or is that transition, is that all part of that transition period?
Yeah, another great question, and it's something that I've lived through, right? I've lived through hiring co-ops, and then I've also lived through hiring full-time people. I think one of the things that's really, really interesting, what's important, I would recommend is hire that full-time individual that replaces what you were doing, and that way you no longer have to. I'm not going to use manage that individual, but you don't have to look over the shoulder. You're able to empower that individual to execute on your behalf, where you've given them enough confidence. They know what they know what has to be done, and you're doing this regular check-ins. And I think where the co-op would fit in is supplementing that individual, where when that individual, that full-time individual has grown within the organization, where they understand the systems, they can now begin that mentoring process of bringing on that co-op, where they will manage that co-op, where you as the CEO is not managing that co-op. Because it's really important that as you grow your teams, that you're not watering your time down in managing too many people. My rule has always been, once you have a team of 6 or more, at that point you need to add and introduce another layer, because at that point you're managing too many people, and it's taking away too much time from you actually operating the business and being as strategic as you'd like to be.
Anything to add on about that, Monica or Vigen?
One thing I would say is that you grow your team because you need to, right? And someone is performing an essential function. I have seen it that founders will want to take on a co-op or an intern or something like that because there's some program that makes it free, but it's 5 or 6 hours a week and it's not a full-time commitment or not even a significant commitment. I mean, 9 times out of 10 you spend a lot of time mentoring the person and you don't actually get the value. I love to mentor people and I love to work with people, with students and young founders. So it's not that I don't want to, but does it actually add value to the business to have a very small commitment? It really doesn't. Right? So the only reason you should be bringing on people is if they can really add value to the business.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I can add that, it's it kind of going back to when you make that realization is, at an earlier stage, you're more tactical. So you're bringing maybe people or co-op to focus on very specific tasks. But as you go to a scale up and therefore a CEO role, you're more strategic. So you're thinking more of permanent hires because there's a defined task and a role, set of tasks and a role that one needs to oversee. And the word that comes to my mind quite often, which is a big trap when you hit that stage, is the issue of trust. So this is where a lot of founders, when they start transitioning, they have a hard time letting go and trusting people with the duty that they are hired for. So to me, it's important to be mindful of transitioning from a tactical set of decisions to more strategic set of decisions, and then hiring people that fulfill those strategic roles. You can still have co-ops, to help those people. But at the end of the day, now that as a CEO, your focus is more, finding new channels for your products, raising more money, generating revenue, operating lean, then you want to make sure the operation is happening and there are good people there that you trust them to do that. And there may be good people and trustworthy, but sometimes these founders have difficulty letting go because they're kind of used to that rush, that being everywhere and feeling that you're doing a good job because you're everywhere, but in fact you're not.
I think that's great. I think that's a great segue to the next question. You mentioned that letting go is a challenge. Do you see that as kind of the main challenge? Like, is that the most difficult part, or is there another element? And from your experience, Daniel and Monica, what is the main challenge, and are there other ones as well?
I agree wholeheartedly with the letting go. And to be transparent, something that I also had a little bit of a challenge with too, right? Because one of the things is, as the founder, you have the vision, where you want to go, and then you bring on someone, but you don't fully empower that individual. You say you tell that individual, I'm empowering you, but while they're executing the marketing strategy, you're also planning another marketing strategy, right? And then you're sort of stepping over their feet, or you bring on someone for product, but you have all the product ideas, right? And so it's really I think it's knowing when to empower, how to empower, and how to trust that individual. Trust that that individual is going to make the right decision. Also understand that that individual may fail, right? And that individual may make mistakes, but providing them with that safe environment to make mistakes, where when they make mistakes, it's not a reprimand, but that's an opportunity now for you to use as a coaching of, this is an alternative that you might want to try. And so it's resisting the temptation to do. That's what I would say. Resist the temptation to do, but really allow that individual that you've empowered in that role to fully operate in their role.
I absolutely agree. Because when you're a founder, you're so used to doing everything. You do every single role at the company. Your HR, your technical development, right? There's no role you don't fulfill. So, and you get used to it, and you have to be good at it to some extent, or you're not going to be in the position where you're able to hire anybody. So all of a sudden you're in the position where you shouldn't actually be doing everything, and you have to be selective. What do I let go? I've got to let go of some of this. And of course, you think of yourself as this person who does everything as it's supposed to be done. That's done correctly, right? But if you have to trust the people you're bringing on, that they may have a slightly different approach, but it's their job now. It's not your job to be interfering in their lower level decisions. And I think in a somewhat interesting, I have another, other than my own experience as a startup founder, in my role as director of the Forge, I literally met, hundreds of startups, and I was racking my brain to think of the founders who fit this description, people who are, technology focused at heart, app builders, game developers, people who like building things, and how did those businesses go? And I realized I couldn't think of anyone. No names came to mind. And the reason I can't remember them is because most of the businesses didn't end up going very far after, right? So I look back at the list, and unfortunately, most of those companies where I knew personally that these were founders who couldn't stop building product. That's a specific example I have, because we were very tech focused. They mostly folded. And it's very sad, because some of them were really good companies, investable technologies. They either folded or more commonly became the walking dead. They would persist on small grants or personal funding, with the founder endlessly iterating toward a new product, even if they had a team, right? Because they couldn't let go. So it was interesting to reflect on this question, not only from a personal perspective, but from the startup founders that I've met and interacted with.
Mm-hmm. I love that example, because I've seen exactly the same. They either continue to build new products, or they continue to refine and perfect what they've already built, and they just continue to do that one thing. So I'm going to put you all on the spot here, and I'm going to start with you, Monica. When we talk about, and going back to what Daniel said, about how, you have to empower individuals, and the example that you gave about, you hire somebody to work on the product side, but you have all the product ideas. Can you provide examples, from like things that you've experienced as a leader, where you had a moment and thought, yeah, I probably did too much there. I probably interfered too much there. Do you have a story that you can tell about your own experience, and then what did you do as a result afterwards? How did you kind of change that and transition yourself?
Sure. I could give an example of hiring someone who was doing sales and marketing, which is something, or elements of both in the position. And because we're the ones who were accustomed to doing all the communication with the clients and with our user base, we were controlling the message, right? So we knew how we wanted to talk to our customers, and what we wanted to say. So we brought on someone else with a different approach. We hired them because they're experienced, because they had deep expertise in medical devices. And at some point, we realized that we're getting way too involved in these decisions. It was wrong, right? Because It's just it was habit more than anything else. We were used to like this is the newsletter we're going to send out this month, and this is what it's going to say. But why am I editing the fonts in a newsletter when we have somebody for that? That's exactly the wrong thing to be doing. And the one good thing I'll say is that I caught myself before it went too far.
That's great, and that's the value of having gone through that and seen other startups that you can catch yourself in that moment and kind of step back. For some who might be starting their first or second business who haven't gone through that, it might be a bit more difficult to catch and then to subsequently let go, right?
It's
So
a fine line, right? Because you want everything to be perfect when you right it. You don't want to let anything go. So I understand.
Yeah, difficult for sure. Daniel, do you have a story to share about, perhaps catching yourself or maybe catching yourself too late?
Yeah, I think for me, one of the things is, when I look at, for example, our mobile app, I built the MVP, and I dreamt about the MVP. I built it in the middle of the night. I built it in the morning. I built it in the day. I wanted all these bells and whistles, and then I brought on a product person, and told them, go ahead, you're in charge, build this out. And like, what was said before is they were building out a roadmap, and I was building out new feature sets. And, they would have their developer meetings, and then I just, instant message the developer. What would happen if we did this? Could you add this? And so while the dev team was going this way, I would bring the dev team that way. And then, a really, really good example is, I work really, really late at night. And we had some offshore developers. And so in the middle of the night, 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, everything that was planned during the day or all the tasks that were given to the offshore developers, I undid them. Because I had my own objectives that I wanted to see implemented. And it just got to a point where I think that individual was empowered to say, we need to have a conversation because everyone's confused. And I think once I had that come to Jesus moment, I realized that it was really important for me to take a step back and allow the product team to truly operate independently. And then for me, it was just having updates for me where I can have those conversations. And then over time, the relationship became better, right? But it's so, as a founder, it's a slippery slope, right? And I use the example of it's like holding a wet fish. Is you just go down that rabbit hole so quickly because it's your baby, right? You're the one that thought about it. You're so in love with it that every single thing has to be perfect, and that perfection is in your head.
And that goes back to what Monica was saying about habit, right? Because you're doing it, but you don't even realize it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a very great story because it shows the importance of the team, right? For the team to say, if anybody here is watching or watching and recording, if you're thinking of joining a startup or if you're already working a startup, you're not the founder. These are conversations that you can have with the founder, with the CEO, if you're noticing these things, right? Because oftentimes it might just be habit that they're doing that. It's not really born from a negative intention to harm the team or to harm the progress or to control everything. It's just habit because of the way that you've operated and gotten by so far.
Yeah.
So thank you for that story, Daniel. Vigen, over to you.
Yeah, so I'm going to flip it. Daniel's example is a good one, but sometimes you end up hiring wrong people, and you have finite resources, and you really want to stick to this person, and you don't have the skills to, in a very direct and constructive way, correct the course. And get to a point that you can trust and forgive and delegate responsibility. So I've done that. I've done that mistake where I hired wrong people. One person in particular that comes to my mind. And it took me a long time to come to realization that as much as I like this person, but they were not up to the job. So my failing as a CEO was trying to correct something for that person to grow in that role, but I was spending too many hours trying to do that. And that became a noticeable event in the company, that why you're trying to, you should let go of this person. And at the end, that's what happened. But it was a good learning opportunity for me to know that hiring the right people is so important. Piece of paper, resume comes, you look at it, you like it, you go to an interview, you have all the indications that everything is right, but the proof is in the pudding.
Mhm.
But you need to have or learn those skills or surround yourself with the people that you can go to and say, how do I get out of this situation? What do I need to do that? Because being a CEO doesn't come with a manual.
Yeah.
Every situation is different. They're like snowflakes. Everyone is different. Every person is different. Every situation is different. It's just what fundamentals would you use to kind of equal the level playing field and say, this is my decision and I'm going to stick with it. It could be at the end of the day, not a premature decision. Maybe there was time to do something or fix things. But life in fast lane is very fast. It's like dog years. Every day is 7 days for you. So you better make sure you make the best use of your time and money, because everybody relies on you, including your investors. And they're the ones who they will tell you up front, right in your face, you're not doing a good job.
Yeah. Daniel, it looks like you have you want to jump in on that point.
No, it's you know, it's like I'm listening to Vigan, and it's like yes, 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 because everything resonates, right? And you know, I in a previous startup that I had, you know, that's when, you know, the investors flat out said you're not doing a good job, right? And I think one of the things with being a startup founder is you have to be self-aware, and you know that self-awareness allows you to realize, wait a second, I'm not doing a good job, right? I do need to realign. I do need to take a step back, because what happens is your ego gets in the way, right? You know, we start beating our chest. Well, this is my company. I'm the one that knows how to do this. But it's being self-aware to recognize, hold on a second, you know what? I need to trust this individual. You know, and recognizing, hey, I've made a bad decision and I have to die on my sword for making this bad decision. And I've learned from this bad decision. This is what I'm going to do next. You know, what you talked about being a startup founder. There's no manual to it, and I laughed because, you know, one of the things that my father always says is, there's two schools that you never graduate from. One is the school of parenting, and one is the school of marriage, right? And I'm gonna add to that the three schools, right? And that's the school of being a founder, because there really is there's no manual. Every company, every CEO, everything is different. And so, you know, you might be a founder, I might be a founder. What happens on Monday for you is totally different than what happens on Monday for me. And the only way that I can learn is by things like what we're doing right now, right? Is having these conversations, it's having these mentor sessions, it's engaging with other founders and sharing experiences and saying, you know what, something similar happened to me. This is how I went through it. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to do the exact same thing, but there's some key learnings that you can take away from my experiences that you can use in yours.
Mhm. Thank you for the plug there. Everybody sign up for the rest of our Scale Up series sessions. As Daniel mentioned, super important. Monica, do you have anything to add before we jump to the next question?
I do, because both what Daniel and Vigan said resonated so much with our experience, with my experience as well. I mean, so one thing, if you're you're an early stage startup, you're hiring your first few employees. I mean, the kind of person who's going to work for an early stage startup has a special profile of their own, right? They're doing it for a bit of autonomy, some adventure, because they want to be involved in growing something from the ground up. They're not just then the kind of employee that necessarily just wants to take commands and be involved in something robotically. Like they want to be part of growing something. And I think that it's important to be conscious of that, because if you start micromanaging that kind of talent, expect them to be annoyed. Right? Yeah. If you want to get the best out of your early employees, they're probably people who really want to help and really want to grow if you've identified them correctly. That said, you can also identify them incorrectly, and that's what both Vigan and Daniel were saying, I think. So I know every task is urgent, but it's better to take your time with hiring than to hire in a hurry and regret it later. So I think the motto is hire slowly, fire fast.
Yeah.
I wish I'd always taken this advice. You can be so eager to hire that you'll convince yourself a suboptimal hire is good. They'll be fine. They'll figure it out. If you've got that nagging feeling right at the beginning, you're probably right. You probably won't. We've had it that we didn't get our top hire, but we really wanted to hire somebody, so we went with number 3 or number 4 down the line, and it didn't work out. Like, it would have been better for us to wait and repost and work our network and really find the right fit than hire someone we knew wasn't really our top choice to begin with.
Mm-hmm. I think that's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hire slowly, fire fast, and that's because the pleasant surprises that you get that go against the data and your intuition is probably going to be statistically low in terms of how they emerge. So I think trusting what you see in your interview process, trusting yourself in that hiring process, I think that plays a huge role. So I want to get to our attendee questions. So I want to close it off just really quick. We talked about this letting go feeling and also the risk of hiring, right? So with that risk of hiring incorrectly, what suggestions do you have? Like that risk can inhibit the letting go process, right? So what suggestions do you have to help founders to let go? How can they actually do that? And if they're catching themselves not being able to let go, what should they do then?
I can go. So I always benefited by surrounding people smarter than myself. You heard that expression, and it's so true. And typically, there are a couple layers of people that you can surround yourself. There's some within the company that you trust, they're doing a good job. And there's nothing wrong by you going down to that individual and saying, yes, I am the CEO, but I'm having a difficult time making a decision, or how do I deal with this situation? So you can escalate that to your immediate group of trusted individuals, and especially in a small startups state, that's easier to do. You have to be careful because there's a culture there and you want to maintain friendship, because at that level people are doing many things, they're sacrificing many things. So you don't want to create a bad toxic culture. So you have to be careful of that. But I think there are trusted people that you can go to. Then there is peer CEOs that you can go to. Being in an incubator and an accelerator, it has that advantage that you can walk across the hallway and one or two that you really feel close to, you can discuss and get some advice. But ultimately, I think, like any other company, you need to have a group of advisors, call it board, call it whatever. You need to have go-to people that they have expertise in that field. So if you need advice in HR, find somebody, a mentor, or if you lucky enough to have a board advisor, go to them for direction and advice. So you don't often have all the correct answers, but you have the option to go to the good people, right people, experienced people to give you their perspective, and you can make a decision then.
Amazing. And we do have an advisory board session coming up in 2 weeks, so that's a great plug for that as well. Daniel, 30 seconds. How can somebody let go?
Again, I'll reiterate, it's advisors. Get yourself an advisory board, get yourself a trusted group of individuals where you run scenarios by them. And those are the individuals that even external individuals that you bring them all together where they can take their senior experience and provide you with some guidance. They're not going to give the answer, but they're going to provide some guidance that you can take away some key nuggets from those sessions with them to help you make the best decision possible.
Amazing. There's no map, but there are some signposts along the way, and that's where the advisors come in.
Yeah.
Erica.
I think with your key early hires, your early employees, what I try and stick to is telling them their deliverables, telling them what we need to get done. And I really try and shy away on telling them how to do it. If you found someone you trust, they may have their own methods, and I have to trust in that. If they're getting it done, they're getting it done. How they're doing it is really to some extent. I think that's it in a nutshell for me.
Amazing. I love that. That's so pragmatic. Tell them the deliverables, not the method. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to jump into the attendee questions. We have a lot, so I'm just going to, perhaps we can do this in a bit of a lightning round. The first one that we have, is there a tool that can be used to map out steps 1 to 10, etc.? So if I'm at step 3, but should be at 1, how do I know? There's not really a map, but do you know of any tools that might be useful as guides?
It depends where you are. There's the business model canvas can be interesting and helpful just to get your thoughts together. I mean, having a business plan, it sounds trite, but it can also be very helpful too, just to help you keep organized.
I've also seen for tech entrepreneurs specifically, disciplined entrepreneurship provides a really good step-by-step. Of course, we have to recognize that the situation is going to be different for everybody, right? So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. Again, Daniel, do you know of any?
Sorry, I'll add something. Sorry to cut it out because I remember I'm trying to think what we actually did. Like it's worked backwards actually. Like we knew where we wanted to be, which was to get Health Canada approval. Take that, work backwards on all the steps that you need to be, and assign realistic timelines, and that will tell you what you need to do at any time.
Amazing. Build your own map, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of the things that I learned early on was when you watch movies that are produced, these big box movies, they actually start with the ending, and so and then they shoot the movie. So they actually shoot the end of the movie, right? Or they write the end of the script. And so what I would tell people is write your script. And so the script might look like today is October 28th, 2022, and you're looking at the Toronto Star. And there's an article about you. And what does that article say? And so once you know what that article says about you or your project, then it comes back to like what Monica said, is that begin building it backwards. And so you'll know whether I'm on a step 1, step 5, where you are along in that journey, and then begin the execution process on getting there.
Awesome. Again, I'm going to start with you for the next question. Does the switch from founder to CEO occur after hiring an employee or two, or is the trigger for this switch more subtle? So we kind of talked a little bit about it. I think what this question is trying to get at is that subtlety, right? How do you know how many employees is there like a rule or not?
So I should say it's not like when you hired employee number 51, now you all of a sudden switch to that role. No, I mean, the example of hire is to show the scale of where the company is and the fact that you need to bring people to do the type of things that you used to do with your small team. So the transition from founder to CEO happens in a gradual way, and it can speed up depending on how successful you are with your product development. There is no finite moment. I think you have to be mindful of the end, as Daniel and Monica said. You have to know that in 1 year, you're going to have 50 hires, 100 hires. Think about it that way, how much money you need to raise. I mean, this becomes more real once you start generating some revenue. Before that, it's more aspirational. You're hoping that you will get to that point. So I think the journey to become or transition from founder to CEO happens gradually, organically, but it accelerates depending on what's happening to the company and the circumstances and luck, frankly. Sometimes things happens overnight and you need to hire 20 people, literally overnight. So how do you adapt to that situation? I always make the point of whatever you do, build the foundation for a system, because a system won't fail. An individual could fail, but a system will not fail. So right from the get-go, have this strategic map in your mind that I'm going to build this system and I'm going to put the pieces gradually together. And when I arrive at this point, that means I have to hire my CFO, my HR manager, my sales and marketing person, and so on. So you need to have a sense of the company in the future and the system that you need to operate in order to execute goals, execute decisions.
Yeah, amazing. So, going back to that, building your own plan, writing your own script, having those indicators, those if-then statements that create a system that those trigger points so that you can just execute without thinking too hard. Of course, you kind of have to make changes here or there as you go along, but having that system will definitely make it a lot easier. So I'm going to move on to the next question. I think I'm going to direct this one to you, Monica, because of your work at the Forge. So how do you keep the team? For this individual who asked, their scenario is that the team is supported through youth funding, but often it's hard to find teammates who are ready to fully join a startup. So how do you keep the team that you might already have supported by youth funding?
Do you mean dealing with part-time employees or looking for
Um,
funding? I'm sorry.
mhm. Perhaps it sounds like it's more like short-term contracts.
And how do you manage short-term contracts?
Yeah, so how do you have any suggestions on how to, if you're starting off by hiring youth through short-term contracts because you got a bit of funding from the government or some kind of grant program, do you have any suggestions for keeping them on board and continue to grow that way?
Okay, I think I understand the question, and it's a common scenario, and it's a tricky one to deal with. So I'll give you a few nuggets. One is give these students or interns, however they may be called, bite-sized projects that they can handle. It's unreasonable to expect someone to function as a co-founder when they haven't committed to that right? And they don't have the time to commit to that. Give them something that is a project that can truly be attained. Set expectations with the hours, right? I mean, usually people are only doing this because they want to. I'm always hesitant to think there's bad intent on anyone's side. If a student gets involved with the project, they're usually quite interested. Just try and give them something that they can realistically handle within that time frame. And then in terms of keeping them for the long term, once the funding expires, I mean, you don't have too many options, right? You either have money or equity. You don't, there's nothing really in between. I know some companies have the temptation to work with volunteers. I have mixed feelings about that. It can occasionally work out. It usually doesn't. Just people, they'll find something else, and you have absolutely nothing to tell them, right? If it's a volunteer, you can only wish them well, because you're not giving them anything in return for their labor. So in terms of keeping them, you either have to find a way to defer salary, find a way to pay them otherwise, or equity. You give them a stake in the company, and they're really valuable. You convince them to help you grow the company with you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so equitable compensation and setting those realistic expectations, those bite-sized projects, so that they can actually attain them and they feel successful and want to continue with the organization.
Yes, I hope that helps. I think it's a very tricky problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Um, Daniel, do you have anything to add before we jump to the next question about that point?
Yeah, I know. We had a similar experience where we got some government funding and we brought up some students. Students did really well, and we decided to keep those students on board. And so there is a transition in bringing those students on board. But what was key is when you're working with students or co-op students, it's provide them with something meaningful, something that's interesting, and provide them with support. And so a lot of times what happens is you bring on a student because you got some government funding and you kick them into a corner where you ignore them, and 3 months later, what have you been doing the last 3 months? But it's really important that you maintain very close contact with them, daily follow-ups with them, every other day follow-ups with them, really to make sure that they're being guided. And then once you're able to see that progress in those individuals, you can keep them. And so there's 2 developers that we had the very same experience where they were very junior developers, and then we ended up keeping those developers. And then once we kept those developers, they were able to participate in the employee stock option plan, right? And so there's as you see that growth in that individual, it's important to provide those additional elements that allow that individual to participate within the organization, that gives them a sense of ownership of, I'm a part of something bigger. And I think those are some of the things that I would recommend, and those are the things that I would say create a difference when working with co-op students.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, very fair point there. I think, and it really illustrates what Monica was talking about in terms of like that equitable compensation. There are things that you can do to provide equity, and during their time there, supporting them so that they have a good experience as well and want to stay on.
Yeah.
I'm going to move on to the next question. What skill sets are required for founders compared to CEOs? And I'd add on to that also, how do you acquire the CEO skill set while you're still a founder?
Okay. Yeah, Daniel, you read my mind. No pun intended. Read. There is ton of information out there. If you go to my office, I don't know, I have books and books and volumes of information that I try to immerse myself. So get the education in any way you can, talking to people, participating in incubator, accelerator, workshops, recommendations for books. Again, on Google, there are tons out there you can you can look into, which actually brings a very interesting point, John, and that is finding the time to learn those things. Because again, think of a founder in an early stage company, you literally have no time for anything. And how do you find some white space in your calendar that you say, I'm going to learn about, X, Y, and Z? So the content is out there. People with experience are out there. They're accessible. At the end of the day, it's like exercise. You got to make the time to benefit from it. So make sure you put some time for yourself, for your own personal growth and development. It's important. And if you don't do it, sooner or later, going to come and catch you. You're going to start failing because you're missing skills, don't have the ability to make good decisions. Because as the company grows, you will be accelerating to that point. And at that moment, your errors could be much bigger and much more costly.
Hmm. As a follow-up to that, anybody have any recommendations for things to read, materials that you have found particularly helpful?
I'm going to go on my phone. I'm going to share some audiobooks that are in my library. There's a book called The Art of the Pitch that I listened to, the product book, 12 Months to $1 Million. Where's a couple more? But these are just a handful. There's one book which is really good called Traction. And storytelling. And these are just a handful of books that I listen to on my Audible account, right? And because there's so much available out there that I personally think you need to be in school full time. So, you need to be in, startup school full time and operate your startup and live your normal life. But it's so important to take in so much, because you will learn from examples of, this is what Google did at its very, very, very early stages, or this is what Uber did at its very, very, very early stages. And so what's interesting is, when Uber was at its very, very early stages, they didn't have millions and millions of dollars of funding, right? Or there was an example where I heard from a University of Waterloo student that shared, when they did their MVP, I think they did a soda maker, is they said they were actually underneath the table. And they were squirting out the soda, right? As part of that MVP, right? And so before you run out and say, I need $1 million funding, before you spend a ton of money, understand truly how to build something very, very small. And you're going to learn it from some of these books, right? You're going to learn from shared experiences that others have. And that's what I think, for me, the value is in reading so many books, is to get some shared experiences.
Mm-hmm. So sorry, Mara, I'm gonna jump on to the next question. I'm gonna ask you as follow-ups afterwards to write down your book suggestions, and that way perhaps we can capture those and then send them off to the attendees, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, so we only have a couple minutes left. Vigan, do you mind if we?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, don't underestimate the power of mentors. Find someone that you can learn a lot and schedule regular times. I've done that. I still do that to this day. I have my mentor every 2 weeks. I meet with this individual on lunch time through Zoom, and I have questions and I ask questions from them. So have good lifelong mentors and keep them around you.
Awesome. So I think our next question is about probably similar answer. Read be in startup school, as Daniel mentioned, while you're building your startup. The question is, what recommendations do you have for someone who has no formal business education in terms of educating oneself to improve in both roles? So I think that is pretty relevant to the previous one. So if you're okay, we're going to move on to the next question. Who are the first people or the type of people one must begin to hire? How do you make good hiring decisions and avoid bad ones?
I can tell you my bias. I always hire, my first hire is the CFO or someone in that capacity because it gives me the latitude to focus on other places. That's an area that I always benefit from, finding the people with numbers that can help me. But it varies from person to person. So
Mhm. We only have about 2 minutes left before, well, a minute and a half or so. So I'm going to give this last word to Monica. Um, what suggestions do you have for hire? And perhaps as a spin on that as well, if you started off as a technical founder, right, does that change the situation for who to hire, and how to transition from founder to CEO?
But it's for me it's a tricky question because it every business is different and it depends on the business. I mean, for me, everything we do is goal and deliverable oriented, and we have very intense roadmaps on where we want to be and how quickly it is to get there. So I look for whichever hire is going to expedite the point from the journey from point A to point B. So I'm always looking at it in terms of tasks to get done and how quickly we can get them done. In terms of making good hiring decisions, it's very tricky. Hiring from your network is sometimes it's good because you'll get somebody who is highly recommended, somebody you can trust. Hiring someone that is recommended to me by someone I trust and who I know person recommending would be a good fit in our organization. Um, to me, these are helpful tips.
Amazing. Awesome. So that's all the time that we have. It's 11:29 and we have to wrap up. And I love the note that we ended on, right? That hiring from your network. And that speaks to how important it is to build your network and how important it is to attend sessions like these, attend networking events from other centers and other support services and organizations. So if you can build your network, build your network of trusted individuals, then that makes it easier for you to acquire your advisors, for you to acquire your next hires, and also opens doors for potential customers and potential investors. So amazing note to end off on. Thank you so much, Daniel. Thank you so much, Monica, and thank you so much, Vigen, for being here. It was great insights, and thank you everybody who attended the session. We hope to see you at the next one next week, focusing on finance options. With that, hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Have a good one. Bye now.
Thank you.